Scott,
Tristan,
I know for a fact that you are from a country called the United States of America.
That is unfortunately true. That's a thing about me that I can't change right now.
And as someone who's married to an American, I know that Americans really like things that take place in their country. And this is episode 19, the first episode of It's Probably Not Aliens to be about something that actually takes place in America.
America. Tristan, I gotta tell you, you're saying it all wrong. You have to drop the first A, and it's just America. That's how you say it. America.
You lived in Texas, so I'll trust you.
America. That's how we all say it. We all say it exactly that way. And it's not annoying at all.
I understand that because Americans will just speak completely normally and then they'll just have a name for like a city or something that's just out of nowhere. Like, oh yeah, I was just hanging out in Terre Haute. And I'm like, that's not how French.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that sure does happen a whole lot. I lived all over the place. Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina. In fact, I don't have a really Southern accent. Like a Southern American accent, I would say. But because I grew up in a lot of Southern places, when I say city names, it comes back out. Even normal ones. Charleston is one where I feel like I have to force myself not to say it in a Southern accent, or else because if I just say it off the tip of my tongue, I'll be like, yeah, Charleston. And it's like,
oh my, Carolina Scott. Oh my.
That's it. That's me. That's where I grew up. It's slipping through the cracks.
Oh boy.
Oh no. Well, we're going to meet some American aliens then, yes?
Yeah. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to It's Probably Not Aliens, the podcast about ancient aliens, the show, the aliens, and whether or not they came here before or after. Wait, no, that's not how time works.
Did they come here after this podcast was recorded? Time will tell.
If they do, remember this podcast because I won a Nobel Prize or something. But yeah, we look into claims of ancient astronaut theories, focusing on ancient aliens to get ourselves started because there's just so much to dig through. And we look into not only whether or not it's aliens, and so far we're at 100% not aliens.
I have hope, though. I have faith. I think we're going to get to one being definitely aliens at some point.
That's when the show ends. We got it. We'll just what's it called? The last episode of the show will just be we'll be in our 70s and first contact will finally happen. And we'll be like, well, guess it was. This time it is aliens.
You are so confident about how well this show is going to go. If you didn't listen to the last week's episode, we just now have finally released the show to the public so we can actually get feedback now. And so far it's been good. So maybe we will make it to when we are 70 years old. Also, my name is Scott Nicewander. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show. I know nothing. I don't know I show up like a newborn baby every episode, totally unaware of what we're going to be talking about. And then Tristan says, hey, Scott, here's some facts and logic thrown at your face.
Yes, my name's Tristan Johnson. I go into a cave and come out disheveled and traumatized. Just showing tablets of just undesirable, forbidden knowledge, just screaming at everybody randomly. And then we record it and put it on the internet and people listen to it. So
yeah. I'm the only one that can calm him down by sitting and listening to his ramblings.
Sun's getting real low. So today, as we mentioned in our extremely long cold open, we're talking about America. And actually,
American aliens. Superman was the first American alien, I think.
Well, this goes back a little bit further than Superman.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And also, this also kind of comes to, you lived in Texas for a couple of years, so this comes to the American Southwest, the deserty place, dry America.
I'm familiar with it, yes. Everyone wears cowboy hats. Everyone is real sticklers for property laws, if you could believe it.
And I probably just offended the Texans because I said that it's part of the Southwest. But we're actually talking about a group of people who live primarily in New Mexico, called the Zuni, or the Zuni Pueblo, depending upon what kind of person you are. Just for the record, because I know that we probably have a lot of Americans listening, and I am a Canadian, and so I will not be saying the word Indian at all in this episode because it's considered a bit more of an offensive term here in Canada. So we usually refer to them as First Nations. I will be referring, or by their national name. So I'll be focusing on using the word Zuni. But I just want to make a little note about that because whenever I have to teach American history to Canadians, we have to be like, well, this textbook is going to say this word a lot. So you just kind of have to roll with that. So the Zuni, according to Ancient Aliens, are a interesting nation of people who have been closed off from the rest of society because they have a secret knowledge about star people.
Yes, this was we're 19 episodes in. This is Ancient Aliens episode 2 that talks about this. From what I gather, if I can just talk as a person who's only seen the episode, they are as you said, they're a very closed off group. They saw some of the ancient astronaut theorists use the phrase star people or space people even to describe these beings that apparently have visited the Zuni people all these many, many years ago.
And we have proof because on the sides of some rock faces, they've made petroglyphs that have drawings of people and things that definitely look like UFOs and spaceships and aliens.
Yeah, people in helmets. There's always helmets. That's the thing that is like the giveaway to the ancient astronaut theorists is this person's look like they're wearing a helmet. So it must be an astronaut.
And this one, there's also evidence because if you talk to the Zuni people, they'll tell you that they're aliens. They've incorporated the aliens, which they call the Kachina, into their spiritual beliefs, at least according to the one guy that Ancient Aliens talked to. And that they celebrate the aliens' arrival on Earth with something called the Shalako Festival. And that the description of what the Kachinas look like is that a person with a spacesuit and a helmet and a visor.
Yes.
And that the person who they interviewed for the episode said that his parents saw a spaceship and described it as a bird.
So they were not even, so these aren't necessarily, some of these might not even be ancient aliens. If this person's parents saw them, then these are recent aliens.
True. So are the Zuni people ancient aliens? Or at least did they make contact with aliens abroad that gave them all this information?
I don't even know if the episode asked if the Zuni people themselves are aliens.
They're not aliens. They're very much people.
I didn't think so.
If you think about we're the aliens.
Yeah. I wasn't like, oh, that's a good thought, Tristan. Like, are they aliens? No, I was just like, no, I guess I didn't realize that might be a thing that people had believed. But yes, the show mostly focuses, the episode that I watch anyway, mostly focused on if they were visited and if they, made these carvings and these festivals as sort of a tribute or remembrance. Because very much like the episode from last week, this is a group of people that does not have, according at least to the episode that I watched, does not have a written language, or they don't pass on. It's all oral traditions.
Yes, like many cultures, that their traditions are passed down through an oral culture, which is a thing that a lot of societies do, even societies that have written language. It's just that it's part of their tradition, and it's a thing that happens. And there's been a long and sad history of historians sort of dismissing oral histories and oral accounts and tossing away a lot of stories as a side effect. But yeah, we're going to talk today about the Zuni. A magnet for misinformation, and also people that have been basically, because they're so quiet about their own beliefs, a lot of people have tacked on all sorts of beliefs to them. So we're going to talk a lot about who these Zuni people are and what they believe, or specifically why we're not going to talk about what they believe, and about the not only ancient aliens, but like ancient astronaut theories and things like New Age spiritual stuff and its relationship with not only the Zuni, but with Native Americans in general.
A lot of ground to cover right now.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into it.
Sure.
Who are the Zuni?
The Zuni are a tribe or nation that live in modern-day New Mexico. They're part of the Pueblo people, which is sort of a term for indigenous people who live in the American Southwest, who were formerly under Spanish colonization at one point. And they are believed to be descendants of an ancient civilization known as the Anasazi, who are famous for doing things like building the first apartment buildings in North America and having a fascinating ability to construct and live in some of the harshest environments that this continent has to offer.
Wow.
And much like last week with the Dogon people, the Zuni are part of what's called a language isolate. Now, while we have languages that they descend from, we don't have languages that they are cousins with. There are no other languages sort of on this branch. They've kind of moved out on their own, to the point, and this is kind of a fun side theory that's not about ancient aliens, but it's another, thing that people have made up about the Zuni, is that because of some very superficial grammatical similarities, that people have used the Zuni and looked at their language and suspected that they are the descendants of Japanese settlers who came across the Pacific, because there's some superficial grammatical similarities between Zuni and Japanese.
Gotcha. So obviously nothing there proven. Just
and it doesn't bear out with DNA evidence because
there you
the
go.
Zuni people aren't long lost people. They are alive today. They live in.
There you go.
Yeah. They have a group of 13 matrilineal clans that are organized through roughly like kinship groups. And they have, compared to a lot of indigenous people, they have erred very heavily on hanging on to their traditional culture and have really been selective about what parts of modern American life that they have integrated into their society. They're also a very small nation consisting of only about 10,000 people today. And that's a bit outdated because, as we'll get to at the very end, that number is a lot lower now.
Oh, this is going to be one of those episodes.
Yeah,
isn't it?
this is another one that ends with a charity.
Oh, boy.
So the Zuni are a deeply religious people, and we're going to talk about their religion because their religion plays a large role in how their culture has been appropriated by different groups, including the Ancient Aliens people. The Zuni are deeply religious people. They have a complex ceremonial religious life centered around gods or spirit beings. The word doesn't really translate super well into their religious life, called Cachinas, which is sort of like a Spanishization of their word for it, which is more like Catsinas.
Okay.
And according to their own mythology, and I'm going to be very sparse in the details for reasons I'll get to later, they believe that in the past, their ancestors emerged from underground and eventually settled in their current location. And much like with the Dogon, they have something called the Kachina Society, which is a group that is responsible for performing all of the rites of the Kachina, which is made up of males who are initiated into it at the age of 12. They receive a mask, a ceremonial mask that the Ancient Aliens people brought up and talked about, which they keep guarded in the back room of the owner, and every day it is offered food.
The mask is offered?
The mask is offered food. It's considered a representative. This happens a lot in a lot of different religious traditions.
Okay.
Even in Catholic traditions, like in Mexico during the Day of the Dead, people bring food to their ancestors. And if you have a mask, the owner gets admission into the dance house of the gods. And after they pass away, 4 days after their death, the mask is buried with them. Now, Cachinas, contrary to what History Channel wants to tell you, are more spirits or personifications of various different aspects of the world. They could be something like the elements. They could represent the wind, the water, the sky. They could represent a location or a quality or some sort of natural phenomenon or even a concept. There's Kachinas for the sun. There's Kachinas for stars. There's Kachinas for thunderstorms, for wind, for corn, for insects, and many other things. One quote I have about the description of the Kachinas is that the presence of life is in all objects that fill the universe. Everything has an essence or a life force, and humans must interact with these or fail to survive. So taking this group of people and distilling them into sky people or sky visitors is a gross oversimplification of obviously something that is very deeply entwined with their spiritual understanding about their interaction with the natural world.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if we'll get to this later, but something that I noticed in the episode is it sounded like the people who were, that the one person they talked to who was like a little bit more well-versed in the Zuni sort of culture kept using the phrase specifically, not even sky people, like said sky gods, which like seems totally normal. But it was all the ancient astronaut theorists who kept using phrases instead of sky gods. They were talking about like star people, space people, which just makes it sound more like alien. It sounds like a purposeful mistranslation of what they're talking about to make it sound more like aliens.
Oh, yeah. And we'll talk about where that comes from in a little bit.
Okay.
But here's the important thing, and this is why I'm not going to do too much about the details of their spiritual life like I did with the Dogon. And that is because, and ancient aliens really should have respected this, they have an important part of their spirituality is that these rituals and these concepts are supposed to be kept secret from outsiders. What we know today about the Zuni comes from a man named Frank Hamilton Cushing, who ignored all of their desire to not let their secrets outside and basically earned their trust, wrote a whole bunch about it, and then published it to everybody. Yeah, Cushing wrote in great detail about their sacred ceremonies, and these things that were all supposed to be secret parts of their religion were made public, which is not a good move and not something that I wish to repeat in. I feel like I've already done more than I should have with this episode, but this is why I don't really want to describe these things or go into too much more stuff. And a lot of the reason why people have attached so many of their things onto their beliefs, because a lot of their real beliefs and their real rituals are something that the Zuni themselves like to keep close to the chest.
Gotcha.
So what I'm going to say, for the most part, is stuff that not the Zuni specifically worship or follow, but it is stuff that they share with other indigenous tribes and nations that live by them. So Kachinas are not unique to the Zuni. They are a part of the spiritual beliefs of many Pueblo peoples. As I said, people who live across the southwestern part of the U.S. There are Zuni rites practiced by the Hopi Tiwa, and certain Carasan tribes, as well as most Pueblo tribes in New Mexico. And Kachinas have three different major aspects. There's the supernatural beings. There are Kachina dancers, people who are part of the Kachina society, and also Kachina dolls, which are small dolls that are that look like a Kachina, that are given only to those who are or will be responsible for the respectful care and well-being of the doll, such as a mother, a wife, or a child, or a sister. So Kachina can mean any one of these three things.
Okay. It's got a range. Yeah.
Yeah. So the term star people comes from the fact that in many indigenous nations, and this seems to be if you study comparative mythology, seems to be a part of the religious beliefs of many indigenous cultures in North America, and that there's many different cultures that believe that either people, ancient gods, dwelt in the sky, or that they came from the skies, or that they had some relationship with celestial fixtures, such as like the Pleiades star cluster and things like that. The Pleiades cluster actually shows up in several indigenous origin stories. And it probably has to do with the fact that many of these cultures spent a significant amount more time outside than a lot of, old world, which is kind of not a great term to use, but sort of Eurasian, African societies.
Okay. And so they were outside, they were looking at the sky a lot. Yeah.
And as we talked about with the Maya people, that there is a strong reverence of stars in the sky that seem to be very prevalent in the Americas, because it would be a thing that they saw on a very regular basis. A living reality that they would have lots of time to think about and look at and discuss.
Yeah, of course they like stars in America. We got 50 on them on our flag.
Oh, man. One common one story that you might be familiar with is a Lakota legend of the creation of a certain constellation made by 7 maidens who were chased by a bear, and they were being chased. They prayed for divine intervention, and the ground beneath them erupted and took them high into the air, which brought them out of harm's way. And as the bear clawed at the risen ground, and eventually those maidens became this star cluster. And this formation, this is a description for a formation on the ground called Devil's Tower by white people. It's in the state of Wyoming. And it is a really cool thing. I've actually been to it, and it's such an amazing thing to see. If you have never been there, you probably more recognize Devil's Tower because it featured heavily in a movie called Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh, I'm seeing that. I Googled it. Yes. I've never seen that movie because I just don't watch movies, apparently. I'm not film cultured enough, but This looks real cool.
Yeah. I actually, there's a campground not too far away from Devil's Tower that they do nightly screenings of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Of course they do.
Yeah, because it's America. Everything's a tourist trap.
Everything's like, we got one thing. Let's capitalize on it.
I mean, it's Wyoming. They don't have a whole lot going on.
They don't.
No offense, Wyoming. No, you know what? Offense.
Here's a painting. There's a painting of someone who rendered the bear trying to climb up it. It's a real big bear. It's an enormous bear if it's to scale. This is fun. This is a new thing I'd never heard of. Now it's a landmark in my own country I had never heard of before.
Yeah. I went on a lot of road trips across the United States as a young person, so I have seen many fun things. I think there are 5 US states I've not been to.
You've been to more of the United States than I have. I live here. This isn't fair. How would you feel if I said, "Oh yeah, I've visited every city in Canada"?
Congratulations. I haven't.
Yeah. Does it make you feel? Does it make you feel less Canadian than me?
You've been to all 10 of the 13 provinces and territories, something like that. Mm-hmm. Just because I know we'll get comments about it, the answer is Arkansas, Alaska, Hawaii, Washington, and Oregon. Okay.
Fair enough. Cool.
So continuing, the Hopi believe that their ancestors came from the Pleiades, that they call Chuhukan, or those who cling together. And it's a reference to a tightly grouped star cluster that appears to the naked eye. Other oral traditions or legends speak of origins, if not in the Pleiades, then in the stars generally or other constellations. For example, the Cree believe that they arrived on Earth in the stars as spirits and then became human beings. And as I've learned in my learning about local religious traditions, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy has a origin story that believes that essentially the first woman, Sky Mother, came down to Turtle Island, and this shows up a lot. This is all I'm trying to say.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It's all over the place.
Yeah. And there was also mentions of the Crab Nebula being particularly important in Zuni belief structure. And specifically, they were talking about the Crab Nebula a few times, which might have a very interesting thing about it, because the Crab Nebula, this is the topic of the second ever Step Back video, is one of the coolest, interesting stories that we have for telling when things happened. Because in the year 1054 AD, what is the Crab Nebula today was a star that went supernova, and we have accounts around the world of people seeing this star go supernova and documenting it. So we can we've seen this in the Aborigine people in Australia. We've seen this in cases in the Byzantine Empire at the time. There's written examples all around the world of seeing this supernova go off in.
It's a shared universal event that everyone sort of witnessed. That's really interesting.
And in the 11th century.
And then you can just trace, based on when that happened, when, you can sort of plot out when other things happened, based on when that was written about, I imagine. Yeah. Yeah.
It was written about in China. It was written about, and many cultures have in their oral traditions stories about the Crab Nebula that has roots back to this event that happened 1,000 years ago, which shows just how powerful oral traditions can be, that they can record events like that and keep them going that long.
That is one of the coolest things I've learned from this podcast. I think it's fascinating.
And if you're going to indulge my ADHD on this, there's also one more interesting thing on this,
Please.
Which comes from children's history, which is sort of an emerging field in history, studying the culture and lives of children who obviously don't get to write too much about their experiences and lives, so that it's a little bit more, it's more difficult to figure out what their internal lives are like. And we've learned stuff like how a lot of children's rhyming games have roots that might go all the way back to the Roman Empire. So there's all sorts of wild stuff like that.
And you have a video about this on your YouTube channel?
It is the second ever Step Back video, is on the what's called the SN 1054 supernova.
All right. You got homework now after this podcast.
It's a rough video though. It was from the days when I was still trying to figure out how to make content, as everybody. if you have a favorite creator and you think like, oh man, they're so good at making stuff and I could never ever live up to their level of polish, go watch their first video and see what it looks like. You'll learn so much.
Or ask them personally if they think what they're making is good. And most of the time they'll tell you, I don't know, I'm still trying to figure it out.
That's true. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the weird relationship between indigenous spirituality and claims of UFOs and aliens.
Let's do it. Let's pivot back to the actual topic.
Okay, so there's been a long history of indigenous culture being appropriated by different groups trying to spin UFO theories or spiritualist theories. On top of that, there are a few indigenous people who have used their own cultural heritage to promote these kinds of things as well. The discussion about this gets all really murky and really complicated. One example that I found out about was a man named Black Elk who lived from 1863 to 1950, who actually toured with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, which for anyone who doesn't know about that, it is like the thing that traveled around the United States and sort of showed off what people would associate with like the Wild West to Americans on the East Coast. So like a lot of our concepts of the Wild West come from like this Buffalo Bill Wild West show where they basically built the whole mythology about what was a series of wars and appropriations of people like the Zuni's land.
Well, and I imagine that also feeds into earlier. I joked about how everyone in Texas wears cowboy hats. That is not true, but it is a thing that people ask a lot from people who visit Texas or have lived in Texas like me of like, do people wear cowboy hats? I was like, no, people are just people. But going again to like this whole Buffalo Bill sort of curating this idea of cowboyness, I think played into that. For sure.
And part of what was really sad about Buffalo Bill's Wild West show is that it also featured at least several like indigenous people who themselves were actual veterans of what's collectively called, the Indian Wars. Like they have like people who have literally like lost their land and lost their like nation and then out of desperation, then put on a costume to look like their traditional clothing to then perform for white people. But it was basically like, a glorified rodeo.
That is cruel. I do not like that, Tristan.
Yeah. So Black Elk performed in these shows when he was young, converted to Catholicism, and tried to do a little bit of work by trying to make a distinction between the spiritual and aliens. So, in a book that he wrote with a guy named William Leon, in a book called The Sacred Ways of a Lakota, he says, okay, so this will be fun. So when I went to Vision Quest, that disc came from above. The scientists call that a unidentified flying object, but that's a joke, see? Because they're not trained, they lost contact with the wisdom, power, and gift. So that disc landed on top of me. It was concave, and there was another one on top of that. It was silent, but it lit and luminesced like neon lights. Even the sacred robes, there were luminesced, and those tobacco ties lying there lit up like little light bulbs. Then these little people came, but each little group spoke a different language. They could read minds, and I could read their minds. I could read them. So there was silent communication. You could read it like when you read silent symbols in a book. So we were able to communicate. They are human. So I welcomed them. I said, welcome, welcome.
First contact.
Yeah. So this is Black Elk, a prominent, probably one of the most prominent CU people of all time, a cousin of the legendary Crazy Horse. Mm-hmm. For the record, if we're just like throwing out really cool places to go in America, the Crazy Horse Memorial, I believe, is close to Mount Rushmore. It's basically a huge project to try and create a statue of Crazy Horse that is on the scale of Mount Rushmore. And it has been delayed several times due to funding cuts and stuff like that. So it's always like only partially complete, but it's still like really cool and cool to go see. So
why do I not know of these places? This is my own country. Why is America so big and so uneducated? I don't know anything about where I live.
America's got a lot of really cool stuff. And so if anybody ever recommends to go to Mount Rushmore, go to the Crazy Horse statue instead because
this looks awesome.
Yeah. All right. Did you just Google it?
I did Google it. Yeah.
So this is a cousin of Crazy Horse, the man from the statue, but also Crazy Horse, really big part in like American, like Western history.
Yeah, and really big person if the statue's to scale.
Yeah. It's going to come back one more time. Jokes come in threes. And he tells us that this is somebody who's related to him saying that he saw ETs arrive in an illuminated disc. Then there's other people there's a modern day new age figure by the name of Standing Elk, who is widely featured on YouTube and a regular at the quote Star Knowledge Conference. Who pushes a blend of, quote, wisdom teaching, which has been emanated from what he calls the star people are the star nations, who include everyone from white buffalo calf woman to Buddha, the Egyptian god Thoth, and even Krishna. This is where we get into like spiritualism, where a lot of people in this kind of new age movement just grab whatever bits and bobs of religions they like and smash them all together without any thought towards their culture.
This is a big range.
On top of, talking about his, spiritual beliefs of, his own culture, integrates things like karma and 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th dimensional frequencies. And it attracts a lot of white people who come and really absorb his message. And a lot of indigenous people who are very skeptical.
Why do you think this is a whole big question. Why do you think white people specifically are attracted to this sort of stuff?
That's a good question. If we had an answer, I feel like we should write a book about it because, appropriating. This guy is basically selling appropriation of his own culture, which is kind of sad. Yeah, so he embraces the idea of star people or star beings, and that's kind of where this term is popularized, or not specifically him, but like the New Age movement sort of brought it in. But veers significantly from the sensibilities of many of his own people, especially because a lot of his own people are Christian and reject his spiritual panoply, and others are merely suspicious. I found this from an article from a CU newspaper, so that's why it's like. It's very like, ooh, there's no hot goss going on here.
This is good. It's a little drama going on.
Yeah. I love these quotes that I got that I'm just like, I can't paraphrase them. Like the quote unquote chief seems to have taken up the star people owing to their popular cachet as a means through which to create an eclectic new age religion suitable to the Sedona set.
The quote, the chief in quotes.
Yeah.
Delicious. This actually does bring up one quick thing, and then we'll jump back into it. Some people have requested, again, we're just starting to get feedback. Some people have requested potentially sources in the descriptions of our podcast episodes. We'll figure that out.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of those written down somewhere. I can probably put that together. Yeah. So while these are just two cases of people and it comes from a lot of, internal hot goss, it is an example of how New Ageism specifically has appropriated a ton of indigenous spirituality. And because the Zuni are very closed off and do not want their spirituality to be public, a lot has latched on to them specifically.
Because they're not going to speak up to refute or set things right. They're just like, leave us alone.
Yeah. I want to get another quote here as a response to what a prominent Lakota person who is part of the Fort Peck Reservation in Montana, a political activist with direct family connections to the American Indian movement, has to say on these beliefs.
Yes, please. I would love any sort of direct quotes from sort of primary sources, as it were.
I never heard of those star people stories until just recently, he said, when folks started watching Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, and as far as I am concerned, they are all made up. What I have been told by the chiefs of Dakota and Lakota, as well as the Northern Cheyenne, is that we're all born with a spirit helper. I don't think my creator would like it very much that someone buzzing out of a spaceship is one of his helpers.
Hold on. Our show just got called out. Not our podcast show, but our favorite show, Ancient Aliens from History Channel, just got called out.
What this means, though, is that there are prominent people in the Lakota community and various other indigenous peoples who are getting this star child stuff from people who have watched Ancient Aliens and then think, hey, here's a person that's prominent in the indigenous community. Maybe I should ask them if their spiritual helpers are actually aliens.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Oof. fun. Very, very, very cool and good.
Cool and good. We're
thumbs up,
having
white
fun.
people. Just batting 1,000 on this one.
Cool and good and normal, actually. And I think we're going to end it on a happy note, right?
Well,
okay.
Let's talk. I'm gonna kind of come together and wrap up a lot of what's being talked about here. So,
all right, yeah. Weave your web.
Okay, so another thing about the Zuni is that when Spanish colonizers arrived in modern-day New Mexico in the 16th century, they were believed to have come from what are called the Seven Cities of Cibola, which is supposed to be the rumored Empire of Gold that was sought for in vain by a man named Francisco Vasquez de Coronado and other conquistadors. So, yeah, the Zuni were colonized by the Spanish. I'm sure many know that. Them and other Pueblo tribes did try to rise up against Spanish rule, but were ultimately defeated in the Pueblo Rebellion. And like with the Dogon, the Zuni have a religion that adapts and adds to their own beliefs because they have an oral tradition, much like how Sirius B got added to the Dogon belief structure. To some people in the Zuni community, especially the ones that Ancient Aliens can pay to talk on their show, they can integrate things like UFOs and aliens into their spiritual belief, and that not being a contradiction.
Sure.
And as I've said earlier, comparative studies of indigenous people show many references to stars in the sky. And also that all of a sudden, somehow, what were called sky people became star people in New Age circles.
It sounds so... It is so New Agey. I know we keep using that phrase, but that's what it sounds like. Sky people becoming star people is very like, I don't know. It's I say this for aesthetically only, it's rad. Everything else about it's got some problems.
Yeah. To kind of give an example of like the integration and relationship that we were seeing with the Zuni people, there's one Zuni elder by the name of Clifford Mahudi. And he's a Zuni elder. He's a member of the Kachina Society. His story says that grandfathers taught him about a very direct connection his people had with beings from space. He explains that he was taught by his grandfathers, who did not speak English, and interpreted their words and concepts using modern phrasings that nonetheless accurately represent his old beliefs. Mahudi does this, it seems, to account for what many would deem outlandish developments that seem to have gained a foothold in some quarters of this is again some inside drama of modern Native American thought that ancestors were extraterrestrial aliens and that they continue to visit and interact with peoples to this day, a claim independent of the peyote religion and hallucinatory experience. So just to show that like there is like some corners of Native American society where this is a thing that's being like, played with.
Yeah.
So that makes things even more complicated because, there are even people who are not grifters who are really talking about the idea of integrating the idea of extraterrestrials into their own spirituality, much in the same way that I imagine someday when the Mormons go to convert the aliens on the other side of the universe, they're going to have to do.
They're going to have to reconcile with it, yeah.
We know that, we don't know, but we can pretty rightly guess that there is life somewhere in the universe. And the fact that there are people trying to spiritually integrate that certainty into their religious worldview seems more progressive than what it's written off as, but it doesn't mean that it's proof that this actually happened.
Yeah, it's sort of like getting ahead of the curve a little bit.
And in many ways, a lot of Ancient Aliens is writing about the Zuni people, does a glib reinterpretation of their traditional beliefs, trying to take something that's spiritual in nature and trying to make it literal. And again, the show shows more talking heads than experts who come on as for TV appearances rather than being part of the intellectual discipline. And they don't seem to have a lot of knowledge of what's going on. Or if they do, they are doing extraordinary revisions of traditional beliefs to fit Ancient Aliens.
On Ancient Aliens?
Yeah.
But that show's on the History Channel. They can't lie about history.
I know. Again, as Carl Sagan says, and I think someone said that we should have said this on the podcast a lot earlier, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And
they sure do.
While there are some people in the Zuni Nation who are making the claim that, their ancestors are aliens, that's not by any means a universal belief. And, we would need something a bit more than some, petroglyphs to really cement the case.
Yeah. And we're not here to destroy religion with facts and logic. That's not what this podcast is about. But the idea that there are alien visitors and that they have visited or continue to visit, as you were saying, some believe, it is such a huge claim that I personally, Scott, we've been over this before. I would love there to be aliens out there. Fingers crossed, I would love them to make contact. We'll see how that goes. Eventually, hopefully good. But yeah, just sort of hammering home this idea of it is an enormous claim, and currently does not seem like we have the evidence to back that up.
No. And of course, a lot of the claims outside of that, looking at the petroglyphs, was just another case of this thing looks like a thing. And again, they showed these symbols on the thing when they're not supposed to be shown to outsiders. And even under analysis, they're usually animal heads or other sorts of like nature depictions.
Wait, hold on. Run that back by me again. They were not allowed to show the images that they showed on Ancient Aliens?
I mean, they're not supposed to. The Zuni would prefer that those kinds of things are not made public.
Well, that just makes me mad now. That actually does like really piss me off a little bit that they would do that. That I didn't realize that. I mean, obviously they didn't talk about it on the show, so I had no idea. That's no good. You can't be doing that, History Channel. Come on.
And the last part where I make you sad, because I do want to say that like I'm doing my best to try and respect the spiritual beliefs of the Zuni people by not, digging too much into their internal affairs. Though one thing I do want to mention is that the Zuni and many of the Pueblo people in the native reservations of the American Southwest were hit particularly hard by COVID. I'm sure this has made the news a little bit, but a lot of Southwestern indigenous communities were just like decimated, huge numbers of very ill and dead because of the pandemic. So I would like to put in the description at least,
yes,
try to do something by donating to a COVID fund for First Nations, which is a nonprofit that tries to give support to indigenous communities in the United States.
Yeah, that you have it written here on the sheet. I'll go ahead and say it. The URL is firstnations.org/COVID fund, not fun. COVID is not fun. Yeah, firstnations.org/COVID fund. And we'll try to have that link in the description. Obviously, as we keep talking about, these episodes are recorded way in advance. So hopefully by the time you're listening to this, COVID is behind us. I'm sure there will still be need of some sort of monetary support for those who have been impacted. And also, if COVID isn't behind us by the time you're listening to this, hey, there are multiple great vaccines that you should get if you can get them. You just pick one, pick any of them, go get a vaccine. They're great. I've had one. Tristan, you've had one?
Yep.
They're great. Look at us. They made us podcasters. That's what the vaccine does.
I liked it so much, I got 2.
There you go. Tristan got 2 of them.
But yeah, from what they're saying, a lot of the emergency fund stuff is gone, but right now they're trying to do stuff to make it easier for them to do like online schooling and to essentially build their own resilience network to take care of it, because not too surprisingly, the U.S. government did not come out in a big way to help them out, and they very much had to help themselves to survive the pandemic. So
now you've hit on a lot of stuff that I didn't know about America, about all these landmarks and things that are new to me. But what you said there sounds very much like the America that I'm familiar with. Sadly, that is unfortunate, and I hate that. So. Yes, please, if you can, please help and donate and help out these people in need.
Yeah. Another thing that you can do after you've done that, great segue, is listen to this podcast more. You can
listen more, please. You can follow us on Twitter at probsnotaliens. Hopefully we've started posting something to Instagram. I don't know, but we have that as well. Who knows? Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Tristan, where can people find more of you?
I am at stepbackhistory.com, where I make videos about how the past intersects with today.
Woo!
What do you do, Scott?
I have a YouTube channel called Nerdsync, Nerdsync, where I make video essays that are a little overly personal about very niche, nerdy subjects that I like.
Nice.
And then, make sure, please leave us more reviews. Oh, did you want to read more reviews very briefly?
Of course, yes.
Yes, let's read a couple more reviews because they were very fun last time. This comes from Office Policy, who says, I hope the aliens listen to this podcast and finally decide to come say hi and let us take a high-def photo.
Dang, that's a good one.
That would be great. Blue Snake 462 says, you may ask for 4, but you get 5 stars. That is, I'm adding that bit. So thank you so much. Please leave more reviews. We'll read more of them on the show. They're very fun to do. And if you did leave us a 4-star review in the past, because past me said to do so, maybe leave a 5-star review instead. And tell your friends. It's the most important way that we can get this podcast out to more people is by other people tagging your friends on Twitter. Ooh, I peeked real hard in the microphone there. Tagging your friends on Twitter or telling them about it in real life. We have just a very simple website, probsnotaliens.com, that has all the links to where you can listen to it, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, tons of other places. Really easy to share with people. We really do appreciate it.
And we got a very special episode for you next week. Good surprise to get you through to next Tuesday. But until then, the truth is out there. Probably.